Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is Mapping Where Money Grows on Trees, How to Win Big this Florida grant season. This is our webinar for July 2020. My name is Jacob. I'll be your host today, and I'm going to introduce our panel really quick. I'm the account executive at Planet Geo, and I'm joined with my colleagues TJ Wood, Chris Pfeiffer, and Megan Blanstedt. Hi, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to really quickly talk about who we are at Planet Geo, and then we'll get right into the meat of the content. So Planet Geo is an urban forestry software and consulting firm. We are based in Colorado, but we have offices all around the US and several hundred customers around the world. I'm talking to you from Seattle, Washington, but TJ over here is in Boca Raton, Florida. Megan's in Denver, and Chris is in Pennsylvania. So we provide tree asset management software. Our platform is called Tree Plotter. We also do inventory and assessments, geospatial mapping services, and urban forestry consulting. So basically everything you need to grow a healthy and thriving forest, we're here to help with that. And we've done a lot of work in Florida, actually. So we've had some big cities that work with us in Tampa, Jacksonville, and Orlando. So universities like Florida National University, and some small to mid-sized places like Sanford and Osceola County. So today we're going to cover tree inventories, tree canopy assessments, urban forest management plans, and we're going to offer you some help with the grant. So I also want to encourage you to help make this agenda that covers what you need to cover and what you want to learn about. So we have a live Q&A. We're going to do questions at the end, but there's a Q&A part of Zoom. If you can go to the bottom and submit questions there, then we can read them off at the end. You can also raise your hand, and one of our panelists will be able to see that. I have my slides in front of me, so I might not be able to see it quite as well. So if you need to raise your hand for whatever reason, you can do that too. And you can always talk to me. This is not the only time that we can learn from each other. I'm available. Just send me an email. I can answer any questions offline, outside of the webinar, and we can just talk more about the grant opportunity and help with your project narrative and whatever else is burning in your mind. I'm available, so please go ahead and write down this information or send me an email, and we can at least just touch base about what your plan is. So we're here because of forestry goals. I think you all know this stuff, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I always like to start with the why. Like, why are we doing this grant? Why are we funding an urban forestry? And how can we make these goals a reality with a management plan, an inventory, or canopy assessment? And I just want to remind everybody that this is a great study that's been done, that for every dollar spent on trees, you can expect 2 or 5 times the amount of return. So money really does grow on trees, and that's what this program is all about. And so we want to make sure that we can get that actual economic and ecological return. So I'm going to do a little bit about the grant background. Once again, I'll count my panelists to check the chat room, check the Q&A, check if anyone's raising their hands. Because I don't think we have anybody in the Hurricane Michael zone, but raise your hand if I'm wrong. There is a special program this year, starting this year, about Hurricane Michael. The deadline's August 21st for all the grants. Okay, so Dale did raise his hand. So I'm assuming that Dale's in the Hurricane Michael zone. That's why he raised his hand. If not, you can go ahead and put something in the chat room just so that our panelists can read that out loud for me. There is a special program for Hurricane Michael. There's also a standard grant program and the 3-year grant program. We're going to go through those really quick. So with Hurricane Michael, you can get up to $50,000 as opposed to the $20,000 that's standard, and there's $300,000 total in the pot. So basically, if everybody asks for the full amount, there's 6 people that will be awarded this grant, and it's only a 20% match. So everything else is 50%. You have to come up with as much money as what you ask for. This, you only have to come up with a 20% of the total amount that the project's going to cost. Only 20% has to come from you. And the standard program is that there's $200,000 and you can ask for up to 20. So there'll be 10 awardees that are, if everyone asks for the full amount, 10 people will be given that. And remember that you do need to match the exact amount that you ask for, but we can help you with that. Because we offer software and some consulting and things, we do like to help with that match, because I know that can be the hardest part for folks. So basically, we can provide some discounts on our software. If you do an inventory, for example, we can talk about that. So just let's have a conversation about your match requirement if that's something that's preventing you from applying. And there's some categories here, basically. If you're doing planting, inventory, canopy assessment, management plans, or information education, this is the grant for you. And you can pick from these categories when you're applying. The 3-year program is $110,000 total and up to $55,000. So I'm guessing only 2 people will get this. A 50% match again, we can help you. And yes, you can apply for more than one grant. So last year I looked at the list of awardees and I noticed that some didn't get 3-year, but they did get the standard $20,000 grant. So if you're up for it, you might want to try both. The 3-year is harder to get, but it guarantees it's more money and it will allow you to do an inventory, a management plan, and planting all in one go, one for every year. And I'm just put a note here that it's most likely that last year's applicants won't be reapplying because, so last year they did the 3-year program, and I can show you if you want who got that one, but they have to do it in 3 years, so they're not going to get it again. So looking at who got it last year, knowing that they won't be applying could help you, just so the competition's a little bit lower in that sense. I think it's important to know who's reading these applications. So your evaluators are going to be 3 to 7 people that are chosen by the FDAC. They could be municipal county arborists or county foresters. They might be nonprofit representatives, city municipal staff, such as Parks and Recreation, or they could be Florida Forest Service personnel. I actually haven't gotten word on who the evaluators are. It's something that you probably will have to submit as a question, whether or not you can have any dialogue before the grant ends is something that you might want to seek out. I haven't been able to get information on it, but just know that this is being evaluated by a group of 3 to 7 people with one of these titles. And this is really important. If you want to get this funding, this is how they're going to be scoring you. So it's pretty even across the board. If you can cover these bases, then you should be good to go. Make sure you have a demonstrated need, your goals are well defined, you're following things in the technical correctness, so proofread it. Make sure that you're cost effective in your budget, that you can offer promotional value. I would read through the guidelines a little more to understand that, and that your proposal is complete. Don't rush it. So I have the list of previous winners. I do encourage you to send me an email and I will share that list with you so that you can understand who's been through this process before. Maybe you can even talk to them. And if you really want to, you could potentially get the application through a public records request, and I'd be willing to tell you more about that process too. So feel free to get in touch to learn about previous winners. But really, yeah, do ask questions. The way they're doing the questions is kind of interesting. So they're publishing appendums, I guess, as they go along. The deadline's until the 19th, even though the grant's due the 21st. So submit your questions early. I just give you an example here. So we're looking at the appendum that just came out today, and these are some of the questions and answers that got submitted. So I'm assuming they're going to do multiple of these appendums, and they want you to do this so that the answers are public. So I would get on the questions, get them in to the bids personnel, and they'll hopefully release an appendum in time for you. Also, if you don't know Will Liner, he's really, really nice guy, really helpful. Talk to him, get to know him, just introduce yourself. I did that, and he helped me understand a lot about this grant, and that's why I'm giving you this information. And then this is the one last thing I want to share about the grant before we jump into some of the panelists. I have a friend actually that is a very, very successful grant writer. He works for a large nonprofit. He's brought in millions of dollars from the Ford Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, all the big heavy hitters. And I asked him, I said, what's your secret? And he says, Well, you got to do the 1, 2, 3, and then you got to do the 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to share that with you right now. The 1, 2, 3. What problem are you trying to solve? How you plan on solving it? And 3, how are you going to make an impact by solving it? Now, what he said was that a lot of people do the 1, 2, 3, but they forget the 4, 5, 6. So yes, you're going to do the 1, 2, 3, talk about your problem and how it's going to matter. But what challenges will you face and how will you overcome them and how will you measure success? According to my friend who's gotten, like I said, all this grant money before, do the 1, 2, 3 and do the 4, 5, 6 and you're golden. So maybe even do this as a personal exercise for yourself. Write down these answers and then keep them in front of you as you do the application and make sure you're always doing the 1, 2, 3 and the 4, 5, 6. That's my advice for you. So I'd like to quickly cover the 3 things that we can help you with as far as your narrative and as far as understanding what to do with the money. And I just want to check with the panelists. Has anybody submitted any questions, any hands raising, any Q&A that we should check in on before I start with TJ? Oh, sounds like we're good to go. Okay, so.
Hey, Jacob, do you want to
Yes.
open up the poll before we start doing the different categories?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to turn off my screen, and we do have a poll for you all. And what this is going to do is help us inform some of the content today, and also if we need to follow up with anybody, it's going to help us get your questions. So that way, if you're a little shy, this will be something that the group can see together. So I'm going to launch this poll. You should see it in front of you. So go ahead, take a moment to answer. I didn't bring my Jeopardy music with me, and I won't whistle it for you. But I'm going to spend about, I don't know, 30 seconds or so before I close this poll. So go ahead, take the poll, and we can see if we have anything interesting from the data here. And then once we've done the poll, we got somebody in here. Good, thank you. Some questions. Okay, this is good. Anybody else want to do the poll? I'm going to give it, oh, we have 2 now looking at the questions. Okay. I'm actually going to wait till it tells me that people are done because I don't want to end it early. So I don't want you to feel rushed. This isn't elementary school. This isn't a standardized test. Okay, we have 30% of people voted, 46% voted. %70 voted. We're almost there, folks. We have 3 more people. Get those polls in. Okay. I think I'm going to give it 10 seconds. Thanks everybody for sticking around and voting. 5 seconds, and then we're going to show the results, okay? Okay, so let's take a look at what folks said, okay? So just so we know what people are interested in, we have tree canopy assessments. One person doesn't know yet, and you can all see this, right? Okay, good. A mix of questions for inventories, so that will be helpful when we talk about inventories next. For tree canopy assessments, we also got a mix of what people wanted to learn about. And for management plans as well, a mix of what people want to measure, equity, success stories. So thank you for participating. This will be really helpful. And now I'm going to take it away and bring TJ in here. We also have a couple people in the chat room. So please, panelists, if you can help me moderate. My multitasking is not what it used to be. So I'm going to introduce TJ here. Hi, TJ. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. Hello to all my fellow Floridians out there.
Yeah. Hopefully things are not too chaotic with the health issues that some are experiencing across the nation and the world. Thanks for being with us. And I'm going to just ask you my icebreaker. We spend a lot of time, folks, preparing for these webinars, and the icebreaker is probably the hardest thing. TJ, what is the most memorable tree you've ever inventoried? And we're talking 500,000 trees that you've been on site for.
Yeah, I'd say it has to be a 110-inch live oak, which is nearly 9 foot in diameter, that I measured in Audubon Park Zoo in New Orleans. You know, that's definitely the biggest live oak I've seen in person and had the pleasure of including on one of my inventory projects. And lo and behold, it has its own website. So if anyone's interested about this specific tree, just search the Tree of Life in Audubon Park, New Orleans, and you'll see a bunch of photos. It's awesome.
Yes, please do the Tree of Life. I'm trying to do it. Once again, I can't multitask, so I won't be able to show the tree, but it'll give you something interesting to do after the webinar. All right, TJ, so we're going to ask our second question. Why inventory trees? What data should we be collecting?
Well, first and foremost, knowledge is power in this situation. So you absolutely want to make sure that your inventory is providing you with very basic things, but these basic things are very important to make decisions off of. So first and foremost, you want to know what you have, and that's species diversity. What are the actual species that are in your urban forest? Number two, you want to know where it's located. So that can be XY coordinates if you're using GPS systems, or even address info if you're not. Third, you want to know the condition of your urban forest, or the condition of each tree. Now, many people have their own customized rating methods for this. One method's ISA's method. There's CTLA, ANSI, or even custom ratings that you might be using tailored to your workflow. And lastly, you want to know what needs to be done with those trees. So specific maintenance recommendations and how to prioritize that. There are further ways to customize your data collection, but obviously that carries a higher cost. And a couple examples of those could be specific pest and biotic defects, maybe site-specific things. You could even include level 2 risk assessment, photos of your trees, and in certain situations, especially down here in Florida where trees can be very tightly packed, a physical aluminum tag can be placed on each tree. But the first 4 that I touched on are the basic that you want for each inventory. But you know, if you customize it any further, obviously that might bear a higher cost. So it's all a give and take with this.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thanks. A lot of options there, basically. And once again, you know, we want to help you figure out the best things that are most important to you when you're applying for this grant, so you know exactly what you're getting. And that leads to my next question. How do I manage the data after the inventory?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that your contractor or in-house, that you have technology to manage this data moving forward. There's a lot of products out there that you can either upload your inventory into or just collect it within. You want to make sure that that's accessible to you and other folks within your department, so that this can be a living, breathing data set rather than a stagnant spreadsheet or map that sits on the shelf. So you definitely want to look into some sort of technology or platform to manage that moving forward. And, you know, if you are limited on funding, there are ways to do that on the cheap with spreadsheets, interactive PDF maps, or, you know, just continuously looking at the trees and making notes here and there. I recommend you look into inventories every 5 to 8 years. Down here, that may be cut short by a hurricane or a major storm event, as we all know. So definitely want to look into that 5, maybe 6 years for updating that inventory with a contractor or professional.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to move on to tree canopy assessments, and then finally management plans. So I just want to make sure that people understand the qualifications that they want to look for so that they get the best possible inventory.
Yeah, as you all know, there's the top 3 to 5 companies that are nationwide out there. So you're going to get a mix of bids or a mix of folks in your initial bubble that want to bid on this type of work. But I highly recommend that whoever you do choose or whoever you seek to advise you on this type of work has at least 3 to 5 municipal references of your size. So whether you have 5,000 trees or 80,000 trees, you want to make sure that that vendor is staffed appropriately to get your project done on time and accurately. So at least 3 to 5 references that go along with your project size. You want to make sure that they're obviously ISA certified arborists. And if you're looking into the more important factors such as risk assessment, you want to make sure at least one of those arborists that manage the other arborists at least has the ISA tree risk assessment qualification, or track as we call it. And again, as I referred to on the previous question, you want to make sure that this vendor is adequate at conducting these inventories. So that usually means the technology that comes with it. So like I said, the big vendors usually have their own product, but if there is a smaller vendor out there that you're looking to hire, make sure that their system is tried and true and that they'll be efficient in collecting the data in that.
All right, awesome. I'm going to quickly show a screenshot of Tree Plotter, which is what we recommend, of course, because we make it, but there's other options, but this is just an example of what you might do after an inventory, which is be able to track your work history, your inspection history, take photos before and after, all that kind of stuff. So that's just an example of what TJ was saying. Tree canopy assessments are next. 40% of the audience here is interested in learning about these. If you have any other inventory questions, please put them in the Q&A section of Zoom and we'll get to them at the end. So tree canopy assessments, I think this is awesome because it's incredibly geeky and data oriented. And to help us guide through this process, Megan Blansett is here. Megan, how's it going? What's your job title at Planet Geo?
Hi, I'm on the geospatial team, and my title is GIS and Natural Resources Specialist. But much like everyone at PG, I kind of do a bunch of everything, depending on what we need.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's something that we really try to do is be flexible and be very customer oriented. What is your favorite thing, this is my icebreaker for you, about the urban forest?
So I know there are a ton of benefits that trees give us, like quantifiable benefits, but personally, my very favorite part about the urban forest is just that it allows us to bring a feeling of nature into the city. I was telling Jacob while we were rehearsing this that I think a lot of people in this industry kind of had a similar path as me, where they wanted to go into the environment and were thinking maybe like natural resources or open space or traditional forestry. And then I kind of realized I'm really drawn towards being where people are, and people don't live in the middle of the forest. They predominantly live in cities, and it's only going to continue to get even more. So I really like that we can design a forest where we live.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And we know that right now about 50% of people live in cities, and by the mid-century, it's going to be 2/3 of the whole planet in cities. So yeah, it's up to us to keep the nature intact. I agree with that. So let's get to the canopy assessment. Let's get to the goals of the canopy assessment and the reason that we're doing them. So here's my question for you. What is the purpose of a canopy assessment? If I already have a recent inventory, why even do one?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really common concern that clients will have. You know, I've already touched all the trees within 5 years or whatever. Why do we need to be looking at them from this other level? And the reasoning for that is really just that you get two different really types of information from these two kinds of assessments. Whereas TJ could tell you on the ground, they're looking at the species of the tree, the size, its maintenance, its health needs, things like that. But you're not going to get a complete picture of your urban forest unless you're looking from the top down as well as the bottom up. So on the geospatial team, we usually rely on imagery, which is a cool thing, and it means I can do my job from anywhere. I'm just in my house, but you can see in Colorado. And by looking from the top down, you're able to get a complete picture of where canopy exists in your city. And then the really interesting part is that you can compare that data to all kinds of other data that you have. You can split up by, neighborhoods and see if canopy is evenly distributed where you live. If you have a particular environmental benefit, perhaps your city is really prone to flooding and you're interested in stormwater control, we can prioritize the best places to put trees for those purposes. And often, yeah, it's really important to have both. It's not a one or the other kind of scenario.
Yeah, one thing I've heard is look at your trees from the bottom up while you're looking at your trees from the top down. You need to see the whole world. So I'm going to share some really awesome imagery that we did in Jacksonville, Florida. So we'll just kind of look at that to show people all kinds of interesting data you can collect and derive from trees. One thing that I feel like it's more than just where to plant and where not to plant, right? So I'm going to go through and you should be able to see my screen. And here's Jacksonville. So we're looking at air quality right now. Definitely something that trees can help with and something that everybody most likely cares about. Here's energy conservation, and jump in if you have anything to add about this data. But it just goes to show with these satellite imagery, we can look through stormwater runoff, another benefit that trees really help with that people don't normally think about.
Yeah, so these maps that we're looking at now are all from the prioritization phase of our Jacksonville project. So that means we performed our complete canopy assessment and maybe some other services. I don't know if we inventoried Jacksonville. And then once we had all of our tree canopy data, of where these trees exist and where we could possibly put them, then each of these maps that you're clicking through is a different criteria. So, if I'm most concerned about the urban heat island effect, we would be comparing their tree canopy data with probably temperature readings and identifying like the hottest, I think it's like the most significant nighttime to daytime difference is where you have the worst urban heat island effect. But anyways, for air quality, you're looking at air quality data. For stormwater runoff, you're looking at stormwater values. This is the really cool part where we get to bring in the data that we just created and compare it with any other data, basically, and we can figure out all kinds of different things about our urban forest.
I really want to, again, encourage people to submit something in the Q&A, so at the end you can ask Megan, our resident data scientist, about things that you want to know and things that a canopy can tell you. In addition to how much coverage do you have and where can you plant? Because there's so many ecological benefits that are associated with trees. I mean, we're just going to keep going through these. Wildlife connectivity, racial demographics, so understanding how trees are distributed for different audiences and different groups of people and how to equalize the benefits of trees. Here are underserved populations. So we're taking census data. Is that right, Megan?
One of our really common geographies that we will calculate tree canopy metrics by is either census blocks or census block groups. And then you have the ability to basically attach our tree canopy data to anything that the US Census puts out, which is, if you've ever tried to go searching through census data, it's like everything.
Yeah.
So I think right now we're looking at it.
Oh, go ahead, please. So the underserved
I was just
population.
going to say, we were looking at, minority populations, income disparity, and vulnerable populations. And I think Chris will talk about this more, but having a completed tree canopy assessment like this, where you're able to empirically compare, like, okay, is my canopy benefiting everyone the same, is a really good way to bring equity into your urban forest planning.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I think we want to cover. Especially, I'm looking through the poll as well. This is something that we asked for in the poll, and 20% of you want to learn a little more about that. So thanks for doing the poll and helping us inform the presentation.
Oh yeah, I saw a question in the Q&A. Do you mind if I answer it now?
Yeah, please, thank you.
So Caitlin asks, can you explain what exactly goes into those maps that make them different from just a map of air quality? So basically what we're looking at is we have calculated a range of suitability for planting new trees, and the maps are showing that suitability based on different goals. So like we were kind of saying, if your biggest problem in your community is air pollution, then these are the best places to put the trees. If your biggest concern is stormwater, then those are the places that the trees would go. And it's based on sort of like a full suitability model that brings in some other things into account, such as existing canopy as well as space where you could put trees. Basically, it's just factoring that in. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. She got it.
Yeah, that's important. The legends, I admittedly was also not 100% clear on. So yeah, you're taking what you have, where you can plant, and saying, this is what matters to me. And we actually have software tools to help you do this after your assessment as well.
Yeah, I could talk about that if you want.
Sure. I have one more map here just to show that there's so many things that you can associate tree canopy with, which is one that we did in West Palm Beach, asthma and heart attacks.
In this one, we did, like you said, we took US Census data, and we were looking at hospitalizations for asthma and heart attacks, and we did actually find that they were positively, or rather negatively correlated with tree canopy. So the less trees you have, the more likely you are to have a health condition like this, which I think is especially interesting right now while we're having sort of the world overtaken by this respiratory illness. But then I just think trees are the answer to everything, so that's just me.
Can I ask you about this one? This is a homeownership map.
Yeah. Oh, so I was thinking, it's kind of funny. The title of our webinar and sort of a really common adage in our industry, is money grows on trees, because they just provide us with so many benefits. Their return, like Jacob was saying, is huge. One of my favorite academic papers that I've ever read that sort of helped steer me into this industry is called Trees Grow on Money. And it has just been proven time and time again. I think the study I mentioned is like a meta-analysis of major cities like New York and LA and maybe like Houston or Dallas. Anyways, they compared a whole bunch of different cities' urban forests, and they were able to find like pretty clearly that the higher income, more affluent areas, like better resourced and better funded, will always have a denser tree canopy. And so that's not a good thing. We want the benefits of these trees to be reaching all of the residents of the community. And so that's been a really significant sort of emerging interest in our industry lately.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that unless an academic person told me.
So I guess, yeah, here we're just looking at the correlation between people who own as opposed to rent their homes and canopy.
Got it. Okay, this is my last slide, and then we can see if there's any other questions that we want to clear up before we go into management plans. This is an animation on our Tree Plotter Canopy app. So basically, we can give you the power, and we can also give you all the raw GIS data so you can do any kind of analysis you want. But we also have tools for you that you can move these sliders around and weigh these different factors of what your goals are and immediately see plannable spaces and how you're going to achieve those goals based on these weighted priorities. So anything that people should know about when it comes to juggling these different priorities?
Yeah. Well, we do have another question in the chat that's basically getting at exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, good.
Perfect. You guys have great questions. Anonymous asks, can we develop a map that could be interactive? For example, asking it to tell me how to reduce the heat or improve air quality.
Oh, okay.
And yes, we can. We'll try to avoid, I guess, just assaulting you with a sales pitch. But another thing that I think, do you want to just do a really quick canopy planner demo while we're talking about this?
Yeah, I did think about that. I agree. I'm trying to be sensitive because, we want to provide information for anybody regardless of what they do with the grant money. But since we're here, yeah. I'll show you an example of one option that you can do. While I'm getting that pulled up, I can keep explaining it. So a big concern I saw in our poll was what to do with this data after you've collected it, like what data should I collect? How do I collect it? And then what do I do with it? And on the geospatial team, we really give you a lot of options. We basically just give you all the data. So if you do have a pretty comprehensive GIS program in-house, you'll have all of those data layers and they can be built into the existing system. You can map them against other things. You can continue to analyze them. However, but a lot of small communities don't have that sort of robust GIS capability. And that's why another thing that's really cool about what we do is that we make Tree Plotter, which is usually an inventory app, but there's a canopy planning component as well, where we literally build in all of the data that we just created
using these like complicated GIS data analyses that no one really wants to hear about into a really accessible web app. And I think Jacob will show you that. But I think,
yeah, let's go take a look at it.
yeah, it's a really valuable tool, especially for people who don't have the same sort of like nerdy data obsession that some of us have here.
So here we are in Jacksonville, and we're able to look at our canopy and weigh in the different priorities. And what might happen is, there we go. I'm a little bit worried because I have so many things running on my computer at the same time. But here's the canopy. So you saw the static map that comes in your report, and I'm hovering over and I'm seeing possible planting areas. And this is normal stuff that you can do, which is just understanding the percentage and adjusting it and learning about what you have and where you could potentially plant. That's the first part. But it gets more interesting, right? Now we're seeing those sliders that I showed you. Now we're starting to say, okay, I want to take my census block, but we can take other data as well. So this is city council where, your representatives serve you, for example. Other things that we can do, this is what Jacksonville had us do for them.
Yeah, air quality was their big concern.
Okay, let's try that out. Yeah, let's guide the demo here real quick. So air quality is a concern. You can't have it all, right? So some things might have to go down. Okay, let's say goodbye to stormwater. I'm sorry. And now we have a little bit more of a identifier of where the red's going. The red is what we want. So you see, as I hover my mouse over here, you're seeing the different factors weigh in. So it's just really, really cool. I'm going to say, sorry, wildlife. I'm just trying to get a more honed in. Let's go yes to vulnerable. So, I mean, I'm messing with these, and it seems pretty obvious that there's a very, very core part of Jacksonville that all these things are really applying to. So that's just a rough demo. We have one more section of our canopy planning tool, which is growing the canopy. So can you help me understand a little bit about some of this modeling?
I think here we're just looking at how much canopy we're going to end up with different planting scenarios.
Right.
Yep, yeah, it was really the previous one that I wanted to highlight just because someone asked about it. Sorry to throw you on the spot.
Let's do that. Oh, no, hey, that's okay. We got another minute of this, and then we'll do management plans for about 10 minutes, and then we'll see if anyone has any questions, and then we'll be done with our webinar today. So go ahead and let's get through the question that was asked of us.
Oh, it was just, could we?
Oh, you wanted to highlight a little bit more about this, sorry.
No, that's all.
Okay, cool. So yeah, basically this is one option. This is a tool that we'll provide for you if you choose to have us help you with your canopy assessment. You can have this and share it with the public and share it with city council. And the management plan, I think, is the next step, which is, you've got the data. TJ's done your inventory. Megan's done your canopy assessment. But you've got to make it a reality. Yes, we have this grow tool. Yes, we can put these assumptions in here. We can see what your targets are and how many trees you have to plant and what ecosystem benefits. So we're all good on the data, but something else has to come from this, right? So that's where we're going to go next. We're going to talk about management plans. And with us to do that is Chris Pfeiffer. He's our Director of Consulting Services at Planet Geo. And Chris, how you doing?
Good, thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for joining the webinar and discussion here.
Yeah, it's great to have you all here. Thank you again. And are you ready for your icebreaker?
Yep, give it to me.
This got changed, so I kind of like the first one, but I'm going to do the first one if that's okay.
Yeah.
Chris, what is your favorite animal? If you could be any animal.
Well, I'd have to say I'd want to fly, so thinking about that, it would be the eagle, and then it would give me the advantage of seeing the community forest at a bird's eye view. So I would have to say the eagle for that reason, and I'm an active arborist, and I believe their talons would be able to grip a chainsaw, but there's some other things that would need to be worked out. And I do just want to add that I really enjoy my position because what TJ, Megan discussed is the assessment, gathering of the information, and we work to put from assessment to action. And so I really enjoy working with communities across the country and in Florida, where I'm able to learn the ins and outs of the program, whether it be from starting out to a robust program that's been around for 60 years. It's really enjoyable to learn and to assist and to develop a shared vision where we can all agree upon improving the forest because we understand the benefits that trees provide. And so I really enjoy seeing the passion and sharing that with them. And so I'm really excited to see folks join this webinar who are interested in securing funds, whether it be for an inventory or for a canopy assessment. At some point, it would be very useful to put that assessment into action. And that's where we come in with management plans. So if it's not the stage you're at now, I just will be available. We've helped other communities in Florida with grants, and whatever step you're in the process, we're here to help.
Yeah, I'm going to show a visual of some of the categories, if you would, some of the strategic areas that you're looking for in a canopy plan. So here's the 6 that I've seen in some of your plans, Chris.
Sure.
Maybe we can just quickly show, ask some questions about management policy, capacity and training, funding and authority, inventories and plans, risk and disaster planning, community engagement. So if you have questions about these things, this is typically what you look at. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, they come down to maybe half a dozen categories. A lot of the concerns, key issues and opportunities that we identify or uncover through the planning process result in these categories. Each community is different. Maybe you want to focus specifically on storm response and mitigation or planning. It may not go into a full comprehensive plan at this stage. It all depends on what the community is looking for. And so if you're thinking about this grant, you want to start by getting an assessment of what you really want to get out of a plan and how long, what's the planning horizon? Do you need something to react in the next year, or is this a 20, 30-year horizon that you're looking to achieve? So these plans are flexible and incremental progress towards optimal urban forest management. Just touching on these 6 categories, when you start to put together a proposal, you want to see that it's suggested that you provide a draft outline of what you'd like the plan to consist of, and that's going to change as you finalize contract and project scope. But you really want to get an understanding of the baseline conditions of your inventory data, your canopy assessment that looks at the broad extent of canopy. You want to understand your community feedback and viewpoints on urban forest management. What policies and plans are in place? Are you implementing best practices and procedures and standards? Getting a good understanding of current workflows and operations. From there, you can develop goals such as what Jacob listed there. You also want to look at how to create a shared vision. There's going to be a lot of different pieces to city management and operation. So how do you mainstream urban forest management when you have public works, engineering, complying with ADA standards, reacting to a storm? How do you streamline that so that there's cohesive planning? And that's what those goals look to achieve. And an important part of that too is, how do you measure success? So in your outline, when you put together a grant proposal, you want to maybe include or see that a consultant bidding on the project is including a monitoring plan or a way for adaptive management in an ever-changing environment. So things aren't going to go as planned. How do you measure that and how do you adjust? Those are really important things to look for. And that all comes down to, in the end, those 6 goals. They're adjustable for every community, but something to think about as you start to shape your scope of work for a project like this.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot of interesting ways to look at it. I mean, I think today we know that the project narrative is what's going to really help. We looked at the evaluation criteria for that grant. So I want to just leave the floor open for folks to continue to bring in questions for Chris, because I'm imagining if you are doing a management plan, that this is going to be the hardest narrative to write. So bring in those questions. I have a question that people have been putting into the poll, so I'm going to go ask, what does success look like? Community engagement wise, policy wise, tell us a little bit about a successful plan and how it actually moves the needle.
Yeah, so one thing to think about is that this plan is a living document. So again, thinking about adaptive management, how do you measure progress? How do you set targets? And then being able to evaluate to see where you're at. And that's how you start to measure success. And then success is going to be based on, are you achieving the shared vision that you established for this plan through community meetings, surveys, public forums and events, city staff meetings? You know, are you achieving that overarching vision? And that's going to be measured through different means that are provided in a plan. You also want to see that if there are shortcomings through an urban forestry audit, that you find that those gaps are closing and you're updating your policies, you're getting standards and best management practices adhered to. You also want to measure community stewardship and see the volunteer levels are rising. You get less service requests from the citizens with confusing questions about authority or responsibility to maintain a tree. Conflicts around trees and sidewalks are reduced. You know, different measures, and you can set those targets for measuring success, but those are just some examples. Another one that's real key for Florida is your preparedness for storms and how do you react? What's your response time? Does that backlog other service requests as you take care of storms? So measuring that response will help gauge success of a plan that's implemented.
Okay, guess what? I have some questions that I'm going to just read off for about 10 minutes, 12 minutes to the end of the webinar.
All right.
So, one question is, what is the typical amount of time it takes to complete a Canopy assessment? The grant is a year, if I remember correctly, so I'm assuming it can be done within a year. Is that right, Megan?
Yes, sorry, I was typing a response, but I guess I was too slow, so I have to talk to you
Oh,
again.
no, it's okay. Let's might as well just do it with everybody.
It can definitely be performed within a year. It can be much quicker than that. It depends on a lot of factors, such as how many things you're analyzing. So usually the only things that will end up making a project like that stall or like get postponed a little bit is if we have to wait for some kind of imagery. Like we said, we use an aerial photo to assess tree canopy, so we want to always be using the most recently available photo. And like many things during this political era, the program that flies imagery that we use has become less frequent and less reliable. So sometimes we'll end up waiting if we want a really recent photo. You can usually find like a year ago, 2 years ago, things of that nature. But once you have all the data, it's a pretty fast process.
Okay, cool.
I would say maybe like 3 to 6 months is a usual timeline, and that's just because we do a lot of intermediate check-ins as far as planning the assessment, what we're going to assess, and then sharing preliminary results to make sure they align with reality and what was expected.
So I guess, yeah, the answer is that don't worry about it because within the year we'll get it done, and you can definitely be okay within the grant timeline. So next question, can you give a ballpark estimate or range for inventory cost per tree, acre, or mile for grant budget planning? TJ.
Yeah, and I think that ties in with another question that was asked about what's realistic to inventory in the year time frame. So that goes down to funding. So typically if you're doing the 1 year grant and you apply for $20,000 and you get that $20,000 matched, usually we're about $4 per tree for the very basic assessment of probably 15 to maybe 20 data fields collected. So using $4 per tree and the $40,000 you might have, it's about 10,000 trees. Now, to give you an estimate of our pace, we're typically using our software, at least, we're typically 200 to 250 trees per day, but what we budget for and what you should expect is about 1,000 trees per week per arborist. So you scale that up with 1 to 3 arborists, your project can be done in a very timely manner.
Perfect. So, and once again, you know, I keep plugging that we're happy to talk you through this, help you get a budget out there that's going to make sure that you get the trees that you want inventoried and in the way that you want them. So don't feel like this is your only chance to get all these questions answered before the grant deadline. Okay, we have another one. Also for inventories, I assume the length of time depends on the size of the urban forest being inventoried. What would be realistic in the year time frame? Oh, you already answered that one, didn't you? Okay, you're way ahead of me. Okay, so those are the audience questions that we have. They've all been answered so far. You have a live Q&A. You can keep bringing them in. We have 8 minutes. If not, I'm going to continue to ask some more questions about management planning because I find those to be the most complex. Inventories tend to be easiest to wrap my head around as far as these 3 things. So I want to know, again, what makes a good project, Chris? What are the key ingredients to a successful plan? Not in only putting together a really good plan, but making sure, again, that it actually happens, doesn't gather dust on the shelf.
Yeah, so this is a good question as folks are putting together a grant proposal, a narrative for a grant. And what we often see with projects that are coming in, or as we're working through project scoping, it's important to have the right team, as I mentioned before. So it may not only be the department that houses the city arborist or urban forester. You may need to look at Parks and Rec, Public Works, and if folks aren't involved in the project team, just being sure that they're aware of the importance of an urban forest management plan and also how it's going to benefit them. You want to look at the fact that we're evaluating current workflows and operations, so it's going to assess resource needs and close gaps and improve communications. So a strong project team and also communications that this is what you're looking to get out of a plan and you're helping the other departments. It's also important that there are, a breadth of issues and concerns in a community, and to understand what are the key points to address in a management plan and what's the planning horizon as well. That helps to shape the project because you can have a broad plan that really doesn't touch on anything specific, and something like storm response, maybe having a focus point of the plan and also touching on other elements of urban forestry, but hitting those hot topics. Folks that work in the city know what those hot topics are, so how do you plan for them? And that makes for a good project.
Guess what? We got 2 more questions. And then I also have a question I want to ask if we have time that was asked of me before the webinar, because I did reach out to some of you and try to get some previous things so that we could bring good content. Okay, 2 questions here, and then I'm going to ask the final question probably, but please get them in here, and I'd be happy to follow up if we don't have time for the webinar. I guess we don't have to end right at the top of the hour, but I try to be good with my time. Okay, ready? So these are federal funds. So there's procurement requirements for vendors and contractors. Have you guys worked with or organizations funded through this mechanism before? Did you run into procurement issues? TJ.
I don't think I have experience with that. I haven't run into procurement issues, no.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and
there is a rule about 3 bids. That's one thing that you want to keep in mind, is that there is a requirement of 3 bids. What were you going to say, Chris?
Oh, just that on our end, we haven't seen procurement issues. And from our experience, it's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that on that technical level, submit your question to the bids at email. If you go to the homepage for the grant, it'll show you how to submit that question just so you can get that technical detail. That's definitely something that the addendums will help you with when you submit that question. But we haven't seen anything.
Yeah, there's often state or local registrations and business licenses that the vendors or contractors are required to fill out, and stating that in your request for proposal is important. Otherwise, as you start to go through the contract processes with procurement, those will come up and then it might stall the project a little bit. So working closely with your procurement as you put together these projects is important. And that way, any registrations or forms that need to be filled out can be done early, and then project can be started upon award.
Got it. All right, we have an anonymous question. Anonymous attendee writes, where are the inventories done? Only on city property and right-of-ways, or do you try to access private property?
Yeah, I'd say 95 to 98% of our inventories are done on public lands, parks, rights-of-ways, open spaces. But there are a select few that had us analyze private property trees, but that project has a lot more moving pieces. It requires you to notify homeowners that there might be someone in a weird orange vest looking into your backyard. And it also requires a lower subset of fields that you can collect. If we're just doing something basic like a tree species, an estimation of height, an estimation of diameter, and maybe a land use type, it might just be 5 fields as opposed to our 20 fields of the public data. So there's a lot more moving pieces, and there's a lot less you can do with private property trees. But yes, it is something that we have done in the past and will continue to do most likely. But as Megan touched on earlier, they're very effective at assessing canopy and certain tree characteristics from above, looking at private property, and you can assess citywide data with that rather than individual tree points, which is what we're more interested in the inventory crew.
Cool. So I haven't seen any new questions come in, but get them now. I'm going to ask what I believe is going to be our last question, which came to me by email. And before I ask, I'm going to do one last plug to get in touch. Actually, I'll ask the question first, and then we'll do the final wrap up, and I will show you the tree of life because I got it.
Right. And in the chat, Eric had a really good point where I'm not too familiar with the project in Orlando, but I believe there was some requirement for maybe additional match. TJ may have more information, but there's an opportunity to piggyback with other municipalities when putting together contracts. And
oh, interesting.
we can get more information on that, but I do recall that being unique and a way for projects to get completed. So I'll leave it at that, but just we can dig in more information if needed.
Cool. Yeah, and thanks, folks, for jumping in on the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Nikki. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, let's talk about if we want, piggyback options. That is helpful for people to band together, essentially. Okay, so Chris is very nice, types in the chat too. We got the chat cleared up, and my question has to do with what was asked of me, and it's a community engagement question. So trees are a hot button issue in the community. This person that asked this question basically says that there's a problem resolving around misinformation. People are undereducated on how trees help and what trees can help with. So for example, in this person's neck of the woods, there's people that want to keep non-native or invasive trees because of their beauty. So that was just one example given to me. So do you deal with hot button issues yourself, Chris? And is there anything community engagement-wise that we should know about as far as showing these benefits and dealing with any other controversies or conflicts that you might have experience with?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of experience from doing community meetings and public surveys. You're going to hear all perspectives, and each one of them is taken into consideration. And a lot of times we group those comments and look at the best ways to approach those, because natives versus non-natives and invasives is a hot topic. There's folks that will only look at native tree species as options for urban forests and street trees. But then you look at changing climates and you look at your species palette diminishing, less options for planting if you want to have that diversity. So we try to tell that story where you don't want them to be invasive, but considering non-natives may be an option in order for a resilient urban forest in a changing climate. And so we back that with research and also with information and local context to help, but still they are hot topics, so they're not just going to be put out with one trickle of water. The thing is to provide information, have it readily available, and to continue the conversation. One public survey isn't going be enough. You know, you're going to hear from them, but there's also that return in providing information. So continuing with the outreach and engagement, small work groups. A lot of times we set up work groups just for HOAs or improvement districts because they have a different take on urban forest management. You know, our master builders associations are going to have a different take on trees when you look at development requirements. So there's no short answer, but it's what the best measure is to listen and stick to the resources and the research, not just your gut feeling and your own opinions when following up with hot topics.
Okay, everybody. That's the end of our webinar. I'm going to just, once again, encourage people to reach out, talk to us. We want to be resources. You know, don't feel like you have to hire us just because you talk to us. We just want to help folks get funding and help grow the urban forest. And that's what we're here for. So go ahead and send any additional questions and follow-ups. And with that, I'm going to share the tree of life, and then we'll sign off. So this is the best picture I could find. Pretty majestic. So with that, I'm going to close out our group and say thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you again soon.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.